We're on page 24, the pericope that says the light of the body. If I didn't have Mike to point out where it was, I would forget. I got so many irons in the fire that I can't remember which one I'm ironing at this time. Okay. I want to get to this phrase, if what you see is true. Now, the original Greek emphasizes the light that illuminates it. But I was trying to personalize this translation. And I think this is not a paraphrase, not exactly a translation, but it makes the teaching of the passage available in our daily life. If what you see is true, see, I've changed the emphasis. I want you to realize your part in this process. Now, if what you see is true, what echoes or connotations come to your mind just concentrating on that word true?
True or truth?
True.
T-R-U-E.
T-R-U-E. Come on.
What's real?
What?
What's real? What's real?
Good? Yes.
Jesus?
What?
Jesus.
Yes. See, if you see what God is doing in your world, that's the point. So often, the devil wants us to see what he is doing in your world. Had you thought about that?
Yes.
See? If he can get you to see what he is doing, then what God is doing in your world is unavailable to you. He doesn't have to lie to you. He just has to get you to see something different from God. And God is always at work in his world. He started it by saying, I want a world to be, and the world was. When he's through with it, he will say, I'm through with the world, and so I'm going to put it away. We think, and I came across this in teaching the book of Revelation, people want there to be a big battle or a big thing. God doesn't work that way. He doesn't have to. That's the way human beings work. That's the way Satan works. That's the way everything works but God. God just says, let it be, and it is.
In the 3rd chapter of Genesis, the simplest presentation of that idea of distracting man from what God had already given him.
Yes. See, that's exactly right. That's a perfect example in the temptation of the fall. God had given us, human beings, everything we needed to be complete. You couldn't get any more. Satan deceived Eve into thinking she could get more. But what she got was a subtraction. Less.
It was loss, not gain.
Yeah, that's exactly. See, if you have everything, the only change can be worse, less, a subtraction. I think we can understand subtraction. So that's what is it. If what you see is true, then your body will be full of good things. And body here is life in the body. If you see what God is doing, then the world is a completely different world. We really fret ourselves by looking, as Eve did, at what we think we don't have. But if you already have everything, and that's the predicate here, you have everything you need to be a complete human being. If anything is added to that, it is really a subtraction, and you're less of a human being.
So could we call this a spiritual attitude,
Well,
our frame of reference? In other words, the whole attitude?
yeah, I would prefer it to be a perception rather than an attitude. Attitude, that's kind of objectifies it. It is just we see the way things really are, but that's what I'm trying to get over. This is what's real. Anything else is less than real.
Our perception.
That's the point. That's the best way for you to help you think about it. And yet, as I say, we fret ourselves. We're like Eve. We look out there. The way the Hindus used to catch monkeys. Take a clear container, put something in the bottom of it that the monkey wanted, and he would reach in there and grab it, and by doubling up his fist, he couldn't get it out of the small hole. Only if he let go of it could he get it free. You shall know the truth, what's really real, and it will set you free. Free to become what God intended for you to be. Now, God has a work, task, lifestyle, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, for each one of us. And it varies. I say Ray back there, he has his. Julie has hers. You have yours. Carnell, you have yours. And it's beautiful, it's suitable, and it will fill your life with good things. Anything else is less than what you can be.
In comparing the way that you've expressed things here with the way it's written for most of us, this passage, it's night and day. Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate that.
Well, see, that's my purpose in making my translation, is to try to make the ideas that we think we know more available to us in a form that we can use. And that's the purpose.
This sort of explains, in a sense, some of the things that we encounter or hear about, for example, in conversions in countries like in Africa, where people who have lived in complete ignorance of Jesus and who are beset by, if you will, evil spirits, and suddenly and just miraculously, when they affirm Jesus and they recognize that, it changes for them just like that.
Did you hear?
Is that a...
Yes, that's exactly, yes.
Of what we're talking about.
That's exactly right.
Perception is abandoned.
Did you hear Travis's statement about our newest Oak Hills campus in Natal. The wife of the chief drug lord in the Natal region is attending the services. And the drug lord himself has one of our little rubber. Think about that.
Yeah.
How else could we have exerted that kind of influence? You will never see the man or the woman. Well, I won't say you never will. I never will. And most of you never will. But notice, by being who we are in this place at this time, that's taking place. That's seeing the world. See, that's influencing the world. We want to do great things. I think of my great-grandchild, 4.5 years old, more intelligent than his great-grandfather by far, more charming than his great-grandfather, not even to be mentioned in the same breath. And yet, I think of the potential he has because he is raised in a believing family. See, one of our elders' wives came to me one day kind of distraught, and she said, "Charles, somebody told me I was doing something real bad." I said, "Oh, what is it?" She said, "I told him that I spent my time while I was washing dishes." This was pre-automatic dishwasher days. This was, she said, "I spent my time washing dishes praying." And they said, "Oh, that's blasphemous." Come again? What better time to spend in some brainless activity than to pray to God? So I sent her away encouraged with my blessing and aware that God's blessing.
It says
See,
pray without ceasing.
what?
It says pray without ceasing.
Yes. And so all of this is in this idea of seeing things as they really are. Take care of what you are. Take care that what you are seeing is good and true. Now, we have a choice here. There's evil in the world. And God doesn't want us to be blind to it. In fact, He warns us to be very alert to it. But if that's what you see, see, at the same time you are aware of evil, if you are aware of God's work in battling that evil and your place in battling that evil, then your life will be full of good things. It's kind of like old Flip Wilson. What you see is what you get. And that's, so you have a responsibility that we never eliminate the need for choice. I've been doing some thinking about that as I'm working on my study of Paul's letter to the Romans. Behind everything, and at the end of everything, there is the need for choice. In fact, you could think of your life as a series of choices. I think you could, let me put it that way. That might be too narrow a way to do it. I haven't thought through that, but
It certainly is a part of it.
yeah, don't be surprised if at the end of every thought you pursue, you find the need to make a choice.
And
If I remember correctly, you told us one time that you were asked to evaluate or critique movies.
Mm-hmm.
Is this true, and that you did for a while, but then you chose to quit because the images in your brain was
Yes.
changing your brain pattern?
There was
To critique what?
movies,
Movies.
a group of people, good intentioned people, preachers, other believers in San Antonio, wanted to get together and review all kinds of movies. And that was back in the days when you had triple X and quadruple X movies available. Now you can only get them from a pornography shop. Well, sounded good to me, at least on the surface. After about the third movie, I realized that there were images in those movies that were leaving the subliminal image in my mind that made it impossible not to pop up at wrong times. And I resigned. See, there's choice. You can make, see, God doesn't insist that we always be right, but that we always learn from our experience.
we have to make choices instead of just being passively blown about by the wind or wave.
Yes,
And that's one of the things that James points out, is you just can't be wishy-washy. You've got to make some decisions about where you're going and
And-
let those decisions, help you do what God wants you to do.
so all of this is involved. But the thing about it is, be careful what you see. Choose what you see. Carol?
I wasn't going to say this, I just must have been thinking it very strongly. Let's see, 2 Corinthians 10, it's either 5 or 6b, it says, take every thought captive.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see where that is a choice.
Okay. If you got that, Carol, you got all you need to get out of this pericope. I hope some of you got something else or different, but if you got that, that's enough.
A couple of years ago, you expressed a thought, I had not thought of it in this way, but your eyes are windows, but not passively. They're projecting what you're seeing into your brain and affecting you.
Mm-hmm.
So where you control what you look at, you can control that. If
You got the point. That is the point. See, we do not see passively. And I'm,
Perceive anything passively.
what?
We don't perceive anything passively.
No. It has an impact. We participate in what we see. Okay,
Hear or taste.
okay.
That's the problem I think that some first responders deal with. My family has a father and son who are both EMTs, one of whom spent many, many years. And they see so much. They're the first ones on the scene of every imaginable problem in the world. They battle how not to get emotionally wrapped up in it and yet not at the same time becoming just totally indifferent about it. It's a fine line they have to walk. We can't live with that.
When I was an active counselor, Butch, I counseled one or two emergency medical personnel. When I worked in the emergency room of the old Bear County Hospital, I did the same thing. And this is one of the battles they always fight. It's in the personnel in the emergency room. I've got some dear friends. I had some, like me, many of them have passed on to their reward. But it is something that you have to be, and Jesus, by the way, this was one of his constant battles. I would not compare any of us with Jesus in the matter of compassion. And think about a completely sensitive, compassionate person in a world so full of wickedness that it killed him. And you see that this is not a new thing in our life. It is something, again, that if we see God at work, we perceive it one way. If we don't, we perceive it a different way. Okay, take care that what you see, what you are seeing is good and true. If therefore your whole body is full of good things, and there's no evil, dark places. Now notice the shift from external to internal. If therefore your whole body is full of good things. See, if you fill your life with good things,
What is true?
there are no evil and dark places in it. You will be dwelling in the light as in a room in which a lamp is standing. And that's a blessing open to all of us. It's there. And it comes back to that choice again. Okay?
This has been coming to me going through this in Philippians 4:8, where it says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things."
Yes. I used to use that Philippians 4 passage for my New Year's Eve, or my New Year's sermon. And one of the things is that I wanted to emphasize is choose what you are going to think about. Now, you cannot do that by just negativizing it. If you say, don't think about that. Many of you know my example.
Don't walk on the grass.
Now, I want you to, right now, to clear your mind, and I want you to think of a scarlet elephant. A huge scarlet elephant. Yeah, the color, this color. Now, quit thinking about that scarlet elephant. Don't you dare think about that scarlet elephant. See, that's the way many moral and religious teachers do it. And it's totally self-defeating. You do not... What?
Don't put a bean in your nose.
Yeah, don't put a bean in your nose. The way you get rid of a vision of a scarlet elephant is to substitute something in its place. That's the idea of the coming back, the demon coming back and finding the house clean, swept, empty, and goes and gets 7 more demons worse than itself. We're sometimes our own worst enemies, we moralists and preachers and teachers. We don't realize it, but we get in the way of God about as often as we get out of His way. Our job is to get out of the way of God. Now, see, that's not really as satisfying, personally satisfying. We want to be part of the process, but as much as we participate in the process, we will make it less than what it could be.
Charles, the lamp and the light here is talking about physical light and physical lamp, or is it in any way a metaphor for Christ? In this particular scripture?
I think both of those, all of those, every time the word light is mentioned, just light in the Bible, we ought to think about the maker of heaven and earth.
I am the light, Jesus said,
Let there be light,
and there was.
and light was. And so,
Already was.
what?
Already was.
Yes. And so that's one of the reasons that we have Christmas lights, because the light of the world has come. John says, the light of the world was shining in the darkness, and the darkness was not able to blot it out. Prince translation. See?
Is that your translation from John 1:9? The true
Yeah.
light?
Mhm.
This light? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We could spend another week or two on this, but I think it'd wear me out and you too. Denouncing the Pharisees and those authorized to interpret the law. Now, Luke, as I always like to point out, he didn't just place this pericope here accidentally. He didn't place it here because he knew it followed next in time. He didn't know where it went. And we don't either. We don't have enough evidence in the text of the New Testament to make a chronological life of Jesus. Now, if you long to have that chronology of Jesus, you'll have to take that up with God. I cannot satisfy that longing. The evidence is not there. And if God didn't give us the evidence, no human being can. I get kind of fed up reading commentaries and all kinds of things like that, where human beings want to supply what God chose not to. And they cannot do anything except mess up God's purposes. Mess is the only word. I go back to my childhood. Don't mess with that. Don't mess that up, my mother would say. And we knew exactly what she meant. She meant make it worse instead of better.
And you don't mess with mama.
And you don't mess with Texas, you don't mess with mama, You don't mess with the highway patrol. There's a lot of things you don't mess with. But God is the worst one to try to mess with. As he was finishing saying these things, a Pharisee invited him to dine with him. And he went with the man and immediately sat down at the table. Now, the implication here is that this was almost a spur of the moment invitation. That it wasn't a dinner, one of those well-planned dinner parties. Remember that the well-to-do people and the religious and political leaders of the Jews made dining an integral part of their daily life. There's a lot of people that giving a dinner party is an important aspect of their life. And so one of the bystanders, who happened to be a Pharisee, struck by what Jesus had said, I have a dinner tonight, why don't you be my guest? And I think that spontaneity is what Luke wants to communicate to us. This is not some elaborate, pre-planned banquet with invitations. This is just...
Inviting him home for dinner.
Yes. We used to do that. At church, we'd just say, why don't y'all come home and eat lunch with us, eat dinner? It was dinner with us. The noon meal was dinner. Until I was old enough to know better. Anyway, and he went with the man and immediately sat down at the table. Now notice, Jesus is ready to go wherever he's invited. Now, that's not a general spiritual teaching. That's just, if he could see how he could use the situation to further why he was on earth, he took advantage of it. When his host observed that Jesus did not perform the ritual washing of his hands before sitting down to eat, he was astonished. Now, I use the word ritual because to get over the idea, it was not a real washing of the hands. We have one of the, whatever you call the sections of the Talmud, not a, whatever, I can't think of it right now. And what you did, you dipped your hands in the water and you raised them up to beside your head and let the water run off of your elbow. Now, that doesn't do anything in cleaning the germs off of your hands. It was a ritual, and that's all it was. They didn't care. They didn't even know about germs. That wasn't important. In fact, if you were back there, you would have, most of the time, you would have been disgusted by their cleanliness or uncleanliness practices. But that's not what's at stake here. It is simply performing the ritual, doing what the tradition expected of you.
Cutting off the end of the roast.
What?
Cutting off the end of the roast for no good reason.
Cutting
off the end of the roast.
Oh yeah. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
But the Lord said to his host, while you Pharisees are careful to clean the outside of your plates and cups, but inside you're full of greed and all kinds of wickedness. Now, they were careful. They took every eating utensil, that's cup, container, plate. They didn't have plates exactly like we do, but trenchers, things like that. They dipped them in that same water and let them run dry, clean. He said, Jesus said, look, you really are a practicing hypocrite. Of course, there's not any other kind, but a practicing hypocrite. You are a practicing hypocrite. You're careful about that, but you don't give a hang what's inside of that cup or dish.
Is this following on the previous pericope of an example of people who don't let their light shine? Is that what he's getting? Is this following on the previous pericope showing that these are people who are not letting their light shine?
Yes. They're not looking at the right thing.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that it seems to me like this is an example of having light and seeing darkness rather than the light, and allowing the darkness to be the focal point rather than the light.
Exactly, Mike. That see, as I told you, it wasn't accidental that Luke put these two together. He is illustrating in a practical daily experience what he has just taught, what Jesus has just taught in a more abstract way. You foolish people. Now, again, that's difficult to bring out. If Jesus spoke in Aramaic, which he might have, he could have spoken in Greek. He knew Greek. Could have spoken in Aramaic, Hebrew, or Greek. Read a monograph years ago about the trilinguality of Jesus. And there's evidence that he knew all three languages. He created the world. Why should he not be able to speak any of the world's languages? The thing, and here he spoke in Aramaic, he said, Raka, fool. Now, you oughtn't to call anybody a fool. But you know, God does more than once. More than once in the Old Testament, more than once in the New. Raka, tonight your life will be required of you. Because a fool is somebody who has eliminated God from the control of his daily life. That's not the definition of an atheist, that's the definition of a fool. Goes back to Proverbs, goes back to Ecclesiastes. I think it probably goes back to at least a psalm or two. See, God knows what's in a human heart. And it is imperative that he tell people what he finds there. And so, Jesus, as the presence, Emmanuel, is telling them, you're a fool. You have taken the meaning, the content out of the idea of God and left nothing but darkness, wickedness, bad things. Always look around to see if there's some kind of a flash or some, and I see it quite often. The one who made the outside of things also made the inside of them, didn't he? Now this is a rhetorical question. It is not it's not a question, it's a statement of fact. Just in the form of a question. God made both the inside of things and the outside of things. And so, if we are to be serving God, we have to be clean inside and outside. Not just one or the other. And I probably could go this far and say, it might be disgusting to think, that God is more interested on the inside than on the outside. There's other places in the New Testament where that, I think, would be a legitimate conclusion. Any questions?
In the next phrase, but give what is inside to the poor.
What?
It says, but give what is inside to the poor. I'm not understanding what he's referring to by inside. And saying,
okay, what is really real?
Instead of presenting a hypocritical facade,
Yeah.
present yourself.
Yes. See, they presented the outside to the poor. The poor here are their common people. They were the leaders.
They had a responsibility in this.
Yes, see, but they were careful to present to these common people only what was outside.
An empty facade.
They
Call that piety?
God may call it impiety, but no, what he's getting at is they carefully pruned their outside to impress the ordinary people.
They must be good people because look.
Yes, they wanted the people's approval. What God wants us to do is what meets His approval. And then both inside and outside will become clean for you. In other words, if you give what is really real, that's what you're interested in, is giving to the ordinary people the good things that God has for them, then both inside and outside, your hypocrisy will be dissolved in reality. The opposite of hypocrisy is reality. What's important to God is what is really going on. One of the places as I work on my interpretation or study of Paul's letter to the Romans is that one place, and I can only just kind of paraphrase it, he said, what's important is what is really happening. You know, that's some of the hardest thing for us to realize is that it seems so obvious, what's real, but sometimes it's one of the hardest things in the world to see what's really going on, what's really occurring. You know what? Somebody may walk into this class, they might find it fairly difficult to perceive what's really going on here, because it is not a superficial, it's not just actions, because it is God at work in the world that's really real. In any situation, it's what God is doing. Are you with me on that? And that's one of our major tasks, is to look around and see what God is doing. Right now, it is probably as difficult a time in my life to see what God is doing. I can become so centered on a new ache or pain, so centered on a new deficit. And my deficits are not going to be paid back in this life. I can do that and lose complete sight of what God is doing. Do you know what? He's doing some great things using me right here in this class. I was just thinking in worship today, when I got outside of myself, oh glory. When I can get outside of myself, glory. I remember Frenchman invented probability calculus.
Pascal.
What?
Pascal.
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 Pascal. He has in one of his journals, from midnight to 3 a.m., glory, glory, glory. I don't know what it meant to him, but when I can do that, I can say, glory, 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 and not even be sure what I'm talking about. But I can certainly enjoy it. I want you, and I want to be the instrument through whom God can bring you glory, glory, glory. Hallelujah. Amen.
Amen.
And Alicia, it's time for you.